Good morning. So, as we journey in time through the Christmas period, and I think today is the 4th of January, we can sometimes miss some things that happened to Jesus quite soon after he was born, which I was going to talk about this morning, but I think I need to talk about the visit of the wise men, the magi, or the word that was used for them was Migoi or Magav or Magoi. It was a term used for people who were regarded by society as a bit on the strange side because they did things using science, and that made them a bit like magicians, a bit like they did things other people couldn't do. Science enables you to do things, and if other people don't use science, they were probably came from somewhere like Media or Persia. They travelled a very long way to see the new baby. And if you've got your Christmas crib still up, you will have the three kings. Now, why do we call them three kings? Well, that is because there is a prophecy in Isaiah which talks about kings coming to the brightness of the rising of the Messiah. And why do we think there were three of them? Well, they gave three gifts, didn't they? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But I was thinking about it. It's in Matthew 2. It's such a well-known passage, the story of the coming of the wise men. So we have added to the scripture. We've added three to the scripture. We've added kings to the scripture because we've associated this story in Matthew 2 with the prophecy in Isaiah. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's interesting about these wise men that they travelled hundreds of miles. They travelled a very long way. In fact, they probably travelled as far as Abraham travelled when he journeyed from Ur of the Chaldees all the way to what became the Promised Land. And in the story, there are some details. Perhaps you do know these things, but in case there anyone listening who hasn't heard a sermon on the wise men and learned that the thing about the scriptures is that if we read it too quickly, we can miss details in the use of words. And this is why we have to be so careful to study the scriptures, read the scriptures from a reliable translation and not a paraphrase. Because a paraphrase that tries to make the text easier to understand is likely to add something or take something away from the original text. And in order to be as close as possible to the original words used, we need a translation where the translators have been very careful to accurately translate the words and not add words to the text to make it easier to understand. So, what am I talking about with these wise men? They saw a star. They followed it for months and months and months and months. They followed it. They knew the star represented the birth of a king, of a very important person. And when they got closer to where the star was, to the place the star was resting over, that's bad English, but you know what I mean. The star, they followed it, and it was obviously above a particular village or town. And Bethlehem is very close to Jerusalem. A lot of people think, well, they got it terribly wrong when they went to Jerusalem. But naturally enough, they thought a king would be born in the palace. So they went to the palace and they met with Herod the Great, who was such a wicked man that it was a colloquialism that it was safer to be Herod's what was it? anyway, Herod killed most of his family, in order to secure his position as king, and he acted the part of an expectant Jew, which he wasn't. He wasn't a Jew at all. And he sent them to Bethlehem because that was where the prophecy said the baby would be born. And then it says in verse 7, Matthew 2:7, it says that Herod asked them when the star had appeared. And then he sent them to Bethlehem. And then it says, they went into the house and saw the child with Mary, his mother. Now, they didn't go to the stable. They went to the house because Jesus only spent one night, probably in the stable with his mother when he was born. The census was over within days. Everyone went home. But of course, with a brand new baby, they didn't travel back to Nazareth. They stayed there, probably Joseph keeping the family, going with his carpentry work, and they moved into a house. And when they didn't go back to see Herod, he was very angry, and he determined to kill every child that might be this promised king. And it says in verse 16 that he killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in that region who were 2 years old and under, according to the time he'd ascertained from the wise men. So the wise men told him that it was about 2 years previously that the star had appeared. They'd spent 2 years travelling to find this child. Now that is determination. And of course, they were Gentiles. They were not Jews. They were Gentiles, testifying for all time that when Jesus came, the two groups of people that God revealed the coming of the King to were shepherds, Jewish underdogs, Jewish ordinary people, and Gentile wise men. Jesus came for all. The testimony is there that they came to the dawning of his light. And so we as Gentiles, those of us who are Gentiles, who have no Jewish blood in us, we have no right to the kingdom at all. But the kingdom has been opened to all. And it was these Gentile, majestic figures, rich figures, who travelled all that distance, all that time they spent following this star. That is real commitment, you know. There's a faithfulness and determination in their walk. Well, I hope I've whetted your appetite and made you think, well, I must read and take notice of what seem like ordinary words in the text, which tell us so much about what happened. That's my thought for the day. God bless you. This book is so rich. It is so rich. And we need to study it. We'll have a great year studying it together, I'm sure. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.